Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual fireside chat. We're going to talk about how to create a better, more inclusive future of work today. Creating a more diverse, inclusive workforce is a catalyst all organizations need to improve their corporate cultures while at the same time rising to the challenges and competing in these turbulent times. The greater the diversity of any business, the stronger and more resilient it becomes. We're honored today to have two distinguished guests that are going to share their insights and their knowledge. First, Jolen Anderson. She's the global head of human resources at BNY Mellon. She's also an executive advisory board member at Semper Vitin's Venture Capital. She's also been featured as a Working Mother of the Year by Working Mother magazine, profiled by Forbes magazine as 11 women who are changing the face of finance, voted the most influential women in business by San Francisco Business Times, and one of the top diversity executives by Black Enterprise magazine. Also joining us is Michael Ross. He's a former Chief Human Resources Officer at Visa. He's currently a faculty advisor in the Next Gen CHRO program and a lecturer at Stanford Graduate School of Business focusing on the world of work. Honored to have both of you here. Looking forward to the conversation. Our first question, Jolen, to you first. The urgency to improve diversity and inclusion has never been greater, given the social justice and equality movement's many pivotal moments in 2020 and into today. What are some of the initiatives you're seeing where AI can help to create a more diverse, inclusive approach to human resource management?
Thanks, Louis, for the question and for inviting me to participate in the chat today. As we saw, and as you mentioned, 2020 really did bring into acute focus the need to accelerate the opportunity as it related to creating more diverse and inclusive organizations. We saw the conversations around equity, belonging, equality really amplify in the corporate environments. And many employers and employees demanding that companies do more to indicate and drive progress as it related to diversity and inclusion. As you mentioned, and as you could sort of tell from my background, this is an area of passion and focus for me particularly. And in all the work that I've always done around diversity, equity, inclusion, I really do think about it as a competency. I think particularly around inclusion as a leadership competency that requires individuals to focus on the ways in which they're leading across organizations, to do so in ways that bring the most people to the conversation. I also think that there's a framework to ensure that you are creating more diverse and inclusive and equitable environments. That's requiring both sort of an understanding of the concepts of DEI, why it's important to your particular business case, and having a real strategy to drive organizations forward. It's ensuring that you have those inclusive leadership behaviors built into the culture and fabric of your organization. And it's also about having accountability to driving results and ensuring that individuals are acting in ways that are aligned to the corporate values and behaviors. And I think when you bring each of those into focus, particularly the opportunity around AI and D&I is incredible. And I know that might sound a little incongruent. There's individuals who have thought perhaps that by bringing concepts of artificial intelligence, perhaps you are not able to weigh individual characteristics as it relates to diversity in the ways that you would want to in order to drive a more inclusive organization. But I think one of the challenges in terms of creating DEI is really making sure that you're casting as broad a net as possible, that you're really thinking through a very wide lens in how you're defining and considering the talent that can be part of your organization. And like it or not, for better or for worse, there are unconscious biases that often impact our ability to cast that wide net. We're human beings, it is human nature to make those quick snap judgments and have those pattern recognitions around how we might be thinking about who's qualified for a role. What does a leader look like in an organization? What are the particular skills that I actually might need for this job? What school did that individual go to? And do I want to sort of hire individuals who fit a particular profile? And I think one of the advantages of AI is that it really does help sort of cast away some of those biases. And it does help us broaden our net in some ways by democratizing and sort of equalizing the individuals that you might be considering by, again, helping companies cast that broad net by looking at individuals on the skills that they may bring to a particular role versus the company that they worked at, or where they went to school, or their network, or any of those other things that can sometimes influence or be relevant to one population over another. So I think there's a real opportunity with respect to artificial intelligence to be a tool that we can leverage even more as we try to drive and create more inclusive organizations.
Thank you very much. And Michael, would you like to add?
Sure, happy to. Louis, great to see you. Jolen, always fun to share some time with you. So, I really think when you look back over the last 12 to 18 months, you could say to yourselves, CEOs, boards, chief HR officers, society in general, there was an awakening to the fact that a lot of these issues, particularly around diversity and inclusion, have been discussed for a long period of time, have been worked on in many different ways. But the last year or so, I think, woke people up to, we just haven't done enough. Companies haven't done enough, boards haven't done enough, HR departments haven't done enough. We all have not done enough to make sure we are addressing these challenges and ultimately opportunities that are facing companies as they seek to become more diverse and more inclusive, particularly as the world changes. And we're working from different places, we're feeling different about the way that we work. We have more opinions around the types of things that we as employees want and demand. And I think that awakening, led companies to say to themselves, I need to accelerate and I need to think in a different way than I have in the past. Maybe I've made some slow progress, but slow progress isn't going to be enough anymore. And so in many ways, technology and AI, I think, fit perfectly into that acceleration. And the way I think about AI and technology and the opportunity is, this isn't a replacement for human decision-making, particularly as you think about HR and capability assessment, background assessment, hiring, retention. We will always need to have that human judgment involved. The way I think about AI and technology is it enhances, it accelerates our ability and capability to make the right decisions. And that will be things like Jolen mentions, where the technology can help you eliminate bias that we all naturally have, whether we feel like admitting it or not. And so I think as you structure your AI and technology into your various processes, certainly within recruiting and talent management and your diversity and inclusion programs, as Jolen says, you cast that wider net. I think it helps you as an organization think differently. It helps us accelerate initiatives. And ultimately, when structured correctly and inserted correctly into the company, it should get back to what we're all looking for, which is we want to do better. We want to accelerate our opportunities. We don't want this to be this long haul that's always going to be a challenge. We want to make short-term results feel real, and we want to change the way the organization looks and feels, and that's a requirement. So I think when you think about AI and you think about technology, think about it being very aligned with that opportunity to enhance and to accelerate the capabilities that we all know and have always known were really important to have, but today there's no time to waste on it.
Excellent insights. Thank you so much, Michael. And Jolen, I know you're very passionate about making inclusion a competency of an organization. How do you feel, and how are you seeing AI strengthen that competency, change a culture while holding leaders accountable for the results that they can attain?
It's a great question. And, I really, as I mentioned, do think about inclusion as a competency. I think about, inclusive leaders aren't necessarily just born, they can be made. And it really boils down to focusing on a set of behaviors that allow you to be the most reflective of how you're bringing individuals into the conversation, creating a sense of psychological safety across your team so that individual differences and people who feel that they may be representative of different points of view can really thrive and equally contribute to any conversation. And individuals can do that in terms of the ways that they engage and show up as leaders with the team. And by the way, it's not necessarily things that you would not necessarily think about as being innate to true leaders. It's things like empathy. It's things like demonstrating vulnerability so other individuals feel comfortable doing the same. It's things like making sure that you stop and ask other people's points of view. It's providing different ways for individuals to contribute to a conversation because perhaps they express themselves as an introvert or an extrovert. And so do you provide that extra time for an individual who may have a different point of view and perhaps not as comfortable speaking in a public forum to let you know what they're thinking? And those are all things that leaders, if they really focus and practice those skills, can do well. But to Michael's point, the opportunity for technology to sort of be our aid, our guide, and give us some training wheels as we go on that inclusive leadership journey is there. And I know at BNY Mellon, for example, we've experimented with adding in some of those speed bumps and training rules that allow individual leaders to be more inclusive and hopefully have those aha moments that they will then incorporate into their own lives. A few examples that I can think of are in terms of how we draft our job descriptions. We've leveraged technology to sort of say, are there certain words that are being used in those job descriptions that might be less inclusive than we want them to be, or perhaps not as attractive to as wide a pool of candidates as we may want? As we write particular performance reviews, are there words that we're using in that review that may trigger some additional sensibility? Should we go back and say, you're putting in the word aggressive, for example, in a performance review? Is that a word that you really want to use, or too sensitive? Do you really want to use that word? Be more specific about what you're trying to describe in terms of the feedback that you're trying to give to an individual. And we've actually used tools and technology to help us flag and identify some of those words and create those moments for leaders to think differently about how they may be drafting those things, to create that sort of aha moment, to practice the skill so that they're sort of given the roadblock or the speed bump often enough, we can really help alter their behavior in a way that incorporates into their everyday lives. And I also think it's back to sort of creating some of those aha moments for individuals. We've also done things like create blind resumes. So having real skill-based resumes where individuals are truly looking at that level of qualification for a role. And I think sometimes in a leader who may be a little bit resistant to that process, who may not be quite sure who's going to show up in a particular interview and match the skills that they've seen in the resume, sometimes just creating that aha moment, right? Of sort of saying you had an image in your head of what you thought that individual may have presented as based on the skill set that they may have displayed in their resume. And perhaps that individual didn't meet what that expectation was in your mind. And I think those sort of everyday aha moments, realistic experience, they're training grounds. They are practice moments for leaders to really help them think about these issues in different ways and grow their own skill to take it into their everyday work and life.
I could think of the accumulated aspects of aha moments could change someone's personality and bring empathy around so that they see themselves in those that they manage, regardless of who they are, and that intelligence is colorblind, and that looking at capabilities and what someone brings as a person of value into an organization is what matters most. And those aha moments accumulated over time, great empathy and change a person for the better, that's for sure. And Michael, now, shifting to you and your experiences about implementing AI with HR teams, and what are you seeing how teams are taking advantages from a data-driven decision-making perspective and adopting AI-based platforms to further support initiatives and programs? What are the roadblocks of adoption, and then where are the success stories of adoption?
So I've a bit of a soapbox response maybe here. I've always thought the HR function needed to be more data-driven, needed to be more analytical, needed to think like our business partners and our functional partners do around fact-based decision-making, around having the analytics, the ROI that shows and proves that these programs are important for companies to invest in. And so I think a big roadblock today is, if we're all really honest, the function is still evolving in that space. I think there's been historically some changes where things like workforce planning and technology capabilities and coordination with finance around building ROI cases has happened in the function. but we need to accelerate that. The roadblock, honestly, for adoption of a lot of the technology, the AI, the analytics, in many ways could be the HR teams themselves. And I think if they're honest as they look in the mirror and say, what are our capabilities historically? The exciting part about all this is the demand is now there. Everybody's talking about the future of work, our diversity opportunities, our challenges. Hopefully with that comes the investment from the companies, that they're actually funding the initiatives appropriately, whether it's technology, whether it's new ways of thinking about attracting and retaining employees. But then the HR teams need to step up. And so I think what step up means is they need to embrace the challenges. They need to think about the adoption of the technology. They need to get smart around it. They need to be willing to disrupt their own historic way of doing things. Where if you look across most HR organizations, they're still very traditionally set up. There's a recruiting function and a talent function and HR business partners and the center of excellence and an HR operations system. So we've all grown up within our various silos. And now the demand's there, the budget's there, and now we need to be able to say, okay, this is our time as HR professionals to embrace the technology. Underneath the technology comes data and comes analytics, and we need to be comfortable with that. And when we show up and say, hey, I'm thinking about a new program, it's not enough just to say, well, 3 of our competitors do it, which I think has historically been our approach. It's been benchmarking. So what's the competitive market? Very important, but we need to have the analytics to say, well, here's the utilization. Here's what the sentiment is. Here's what the ROI is. Here's what the reduction in unwanted turnover has been. Here's what the improvement in the diversity of our organization has been. I love the way Jolen talks about inclusion as a competency. And so as we build the competency, we should be able to measure against it. We should be able to say, are we building that competency across? Just like we do for sales organizations. We know how productive our salespeople are. So we need to bring those disciplines into the organization. We need to rise to the challenge. And I think that's ultimately will be one, but not all of the barriers. But one, hopefully we can control if the HR community embraces it, which I think they are. And I'm very optimistic about that. And we sort of take this moment to say, we can fundamentally change the contribution of the function to the organizations. Let's do that together. Let's do that through the core competencies that we just historically haven't developed as a function itself.
I could not agree with Michael more that, part of the opportunity is within the HR function itself, and the ability to embrace data and technology and the power of the insights that it can bring to the function. And there's a real challenge with that if we're honest with ourselves as HR professionals about the comfort level of navigating in that space. But I think we do owe it to ourselves and our organizations to be as disciplined as Michael described, in order to truly continue to show up and add value to our organizations and our business. HR finds itself as the stewards of people and culture, as the individuals who need to advocate for talent within organizations. And if we are not aligning ourselves to the right tools, data, insights, information, that creates the same experience that individuals have outside of work as they do inside of work, and really thinking differently about how we mine the information at our fingertips every day, then I think we aren't meeting our obligation as a function. And so I do think it starts with a mindset shift and embracing of a different point of view and a need to kind of invest in our own capability development in that space.
Thank you very much. Michael, next question for you is, for forward-thinking HR organizations, what issues motivate them to look at AI as a tool for good? And what positive outcomes do they seek and achieve using AI?
I've always tried to think about alignment between sort of HR goals as the primary requirement needs to be alignment to the business goals. If you're working in an HR department that seems to have goals just for themselves, I would question the value ultimately of the work that those teams are doing. So you need to think about the organization you're in, the industry that you're in, the growth trajectory that they're in, the disruption that's happened, over the last year, 18 months around business models and technology playing. So I think as HR functions say to themselves, okay, what is my company's goal? What are my organizational goals? How do I now take HR goals and align it to that? And so right now, if you talk to lots of HR departments, in many industries, they're trying to figure out how to hire, maybe hire back, but hire as quickly as possible. But to do it thoughtfully and to do it in a way that'll meet their goals, hopefully diversity goals, as well as productivity goals. And to Jolen's point around how you think about hiring for skills, not just experiences, all of those things can be enabled and enhanced with AI and technology, all of those. And so I think that's an incredibly exciting opportunity for the HR functions that are aligned with their business goals. Their CEOs probably calling more about these types of topics than they used to. So we've got that moment to shine. So we need to think about the technology and the way in which that can enhance and align with those and accelerate and put those things in, enable some capabilities that you may not have had in the past, learn quickly, take some risk, that's measured risk, and build in the AI and the technology that will allow us to sort of move forward more rapidly and more quickly in such a dynamic and changing environment. And with information comes knowledge, right? Like we know that we have questions around how are people feeling about working from home? Do they want to come back in the office? Do they want a hybrid opportunity? Do they want to be in the job that they've been in? Do they have some time to think about it and decide, you know what, this may not be for me? How do we use data and analytics to help bring insights into all of that so we can recommend and sponsor and make better decisions? And it's a wonderful time, if done correctly, to embrace that technology and to align it with those business goals and missions and realize that everybody's thinking through the same thing. And how much of a competitive advantage can you have as an organization by adopting technologies and capabilities to accelerate that other places may not be doing, and think about it in that way, which will help your business grow faster than others and in other industries and other of your competitors.
I think your response touches on a key aspect about talent management and recruiting and seeing the potential in candidates. And Jolen, based on your insights of adopting AI and your use of AI throughout HR, what are you finding with regard to how it provides the ability to look at new candidates' capabilities from the context of their potential and their ability to grow into a role? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because I think, as you know, HR organizations are always trying to define potential. What exactly does that mean? And what are the markers or indicators that tell us that someone has the ability to contribute more to an organization? And I think one of the opportunities with respect to leveraging AI, and certainly one that we've gained by using platforms that leverage AI like Eightfold, is that we have more ability to sort of index skills that individuals may have. And again, when we truly sort of understand whether or not someone's been a program manager or data manager or an HR BP, a comp professional, a finance analyst, a senior engineer, what does any of that mean? Right. And we have a hard time sometimes defining what are the day-to-day skills required in those roles, such that we can understand where individuals may be able to further contribute to an organization, as well as what are the hidden skills, the things that we may not know about a person. Perhaps they've joined our organization in one particular role, but they have a background in something else. By having a real catalog of skills inventory as it relates to people, now we really understand the power of our workforce and how it can be deployed appropriately across an organization. We're not suddenly wedded to a job architecture or particular title, but we have this very fungible resource that we say, we have this need as a business, we have these skills that can be deployed against it. We can also understand skill gaps. Where are we missing certain capabilities that we may need within this organization that's truly going to support our business goals? And then the fun part, of course, is HR professionals and people who love to nerd out on this stuff. We can then figure out ways to close those skill gaps through learning and development, through experiences, through importing new talent. So I think the opportunity is that by sort of, again, thinking about individuals as skills that they bring to a particular role, having the ability to catalog those skills and deploy them appropriately across your organization, it's incredibly powerful. and unlock something new for a company that I think really does allow them to optimize their sort of labor and workforce market and plan.
Yeah, we know this works, and a fantastic example of this is the Eightfold talent exchange that was set up at the really beginning of the pandemic, whereby clearly there were industries that were going through severe disruption. They were laying off employees. They weren't sure what was going to come back, whether it was airlines or hotel industries. And then on the other side, in industries, you had a massive need for hiring. And so the way that Eightfold essentially stepped into that gap to help provide technology and insights around, hey, the person that you historically may not have thought about hiring actually has everything you need in this industry. And as that technology enabled the transfer between those industries and folks that have been displaced to move into new jobs, or folks that have been furloughed to have an opportunity to work temporarily somewhere else, that was technology. It was AI, it was Eightfold that was driving that sort of industry shift. And to see what's happened to that platform and opportunities, where now state governments have embraced the capabilities of the talent exchange from Eightfold to do precisely what it was intended to do. And as we come out, hopefully economically and through the pandemic, that disruption is still there. And now there will be people who have made choices of, I don't want to go back to that industry that I was in, or I want to be somewhere else in the world, or I think I should be doing something else. And so the technology will enable them to have an opportunity to go get a role somewhere else that previously they weren't able to do. So I think it's always great when we are able to see real life examples of how this can work.
Jolen, I think that is relevant to our next question, which, how does AI help employees answer the question, what's next for me, while setting a foundation to improve diversity and inclusion culturally and corporate-wide across an organization?
I mean, I think what we're always trying to do for employees is to really inspire and allow them to imagine the possibilities. And particularly for diverse talent, research tells us that many times individuals who come from diverse backgrounds need support to really kind of unlock what might be the options and opportunity for them. There may not be the natural mentoring networks and sponsorships that exist across other populations. So we need to find other ways to help talent imagine the possibilities, to really understand what opportunities may be available to them, to understand where they need to align their skills, and maybe even grow their skills by understanding what the requirements of a role are, so that you, as you're thinking about your next step, right? As you're thinking about, I know I want to get from here to there, but I'm not quite sure how to do so. Again, sort of having that skill inventory gives you the opportunity. I was just working through our platform today. As you know, we are an Eightfold customer. And I was just in the platform today, and I was looking at some of the profiles that had been identified for individuals. And there is an opportunity to sort of think about the career path and then say, what are the skills of this particular role? And how can I get that? And then we were able to kind of leverage and pull in some of our own learning and development platforms and say, you're interested in growing from an analyst to an HR business partner, for example. Let's connect you with courses around influencing and negotiation and employee relations and labor and employment. Let's give you the map of what you're going to be required, so you understand where you are, what's required for the role ahead of you. And now we've given you a path to how you can help sort of solve and resolve and ensure that you've meeting the sort of qualifications for the next level of the role. So I think, where AI and technology can really come together is that it helps individuals imagine the possibilities that they perhaps even didn't imagine for themselves. And by doing that proactively and then providing a path for how to get there, that's really exciting for employees. And then, as I mentioned, that also helps widen that pool of talent that is not only considering themselves for the role, but also managers considering them for the opportunities as well.
Thank you both so much for your great insights and just brilliant observations. And thank all of you for attending our fireside chat today. If you've got any additional questions, feel free to reach out to Eightfold, and have a great day. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.